The United States faces a civil access to justice crisis. The most recent national data show us that 92% of low-income Americans cannot access the services they need to address their civil legal needs.
But what's happening in the civil justice system is kind of under the radar. It's a very quiet crisis, even though it's enormous. So if you look at the best information we have about Americans and their civil justice experiences, they have probably 150 million to 250 million new civil justice problems every year. And that's things like being threatened with eviction from your home, not being able to access health care for your kids, not being paid overtime that you're owed by your employer, all kinds of things that can have really significant impacts on people's lives. And as far as we know, most of those justice issues, particularly for poor people, get no assistance of any kind. And the reason for that is not because we don't want to help people who have these really significant issues, but because the systems that we have in place to provide help to those folks are just not big enough for such a gigantic problem.
Alaska is no exception to this crisis. In fact, the very rurality of its populations, and in particular such rural and remote Alaska Native communities, only intensifies the challenges that people face in trying to address such life-altering civil legal issues.
The area that my organization, Alaska Legal Services, covers is the entire state, and Alaska is bigger than the next 3 states combined. That's California, Montana, and Texas. And so to cover that entire area and to provide free civil legal aid, my organization is really the only resource for people who can't afford an attorney.
Current models of civil legal services delivery for low-income and vulnerable Americans, and particularly for those living in rural and remote areas, have failed to respond to this crisis. Yet effective, scalable, and sustainable community-based models for rural services delivery exist in other areas. This includes the transformative impact of embedded, culturally responsive community health workers who provide frontline medical, dental, and behavioral health services.
The access to justice problem is incredible in Alaska. It's similar to the access to health care. There's not community-based legal advocates or workers in those communities or lawyers that are within those communities or members of the communities. The Community Justice Worker program leverages on programs that have developed over the last 50 years to provide that level of services in the communities based on community members, providing the education that's needed to do that, and in a team-based fashion with Alaska Legal Services attorneys supervising and supporting these community justice workers.
During Stage 1 of the Civic Innovation Challenge, our civic partners have made significant strides in realizing the opportunity to scale community justice workers in Alaska and beyond. Perhaps most significantly, we obtained a waiver from the Alaska Supreme Court that will allow non-lawyers to provide legal advice and representation, eliminating a key regulatory barrier. Leveraging this waiver, ALSC built and tested a new domestic violence training module and in-person curriculum with an inaugural cohort of community health aides. During this time, our team also met with 18 institutional stakeholders and conducted 28 individual and group interviews with community members in Alaska. This allowed us to solidify key partnerships and build community awareness and interest in the program. Finally, we designed potential models for sustainability, including earned income for community justice workers, cross-subsidization within organizations, and Medicaid reimbursement for health-harming legal needs. Our Stage 1 findings suggest that the community justice worker model is poised for scale and sustainability both within and beyond Alaska. A design workshop that we facilitated with over 50 potential legal aid partners from across the U.S. allowed us to more deeply explore challenges and develop innovative solutions for scaling the community justice worker model. Joe Nelson, co-chair of the Alaska Federation of Natives and the Alaska Legal Services Board Chair, shares this powerful message.
The community justice worker program gives us hope that our communities and people that need access will get that access from peers and others that know the place as well as they should. So I hope you too will support the community justice worker program in Alaska. And sheesh.